Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you again this week. Talking about, I've thought about so many different ways to sort of like introduce this topic on today's episode. And in terms of my confession, I think that's what I'm going to do. So I peek behind the curtain. I'm recording this before I've decided what the name of the episode is going to be. So whatever you saw in your email or whatever you see listed on your pod app is something that I'm going to come up with 20 minutes from now. But one of the ideas that I had for naming this episode was basically kind of like why I can't promise you results, or why some of my clients don't get results, or why my work doesn't come with a guarantee. And all of it really circles around this concept of doing the work versus talking about the work. And this is something that's been sort of like stewing around inside of me for the last couple of months. I had a really great session with a client several months ago where, he and I like really see eye to eye. We're really like vibing, and he's talking a lot about like how he wants to do this, and he's really agrees with a lot of the philosophies that he's learned from me and all this stuff. And we have this like really great free flowing conversation, or just like a meeting of the minds, really sharing ideas and kind of vibing with each other, right? Like, oh, I heard that too. And yeah, totally. It's just like when such and such and such happens, right? And you can just tell like we are very copacetic with each other. We are on the same page. We're both agreeing that like this stuff that we're doing is really important, and the end result is going to be this amazing new way of thinking about parenting and ourselves and our kids and all of this stuff. And this is the new way that we're going to think about parenting and ourselves and our kids and all that stuff. And my confession for you is that we got to the end of the session and I was like, we haven't actually done any of the stuff that we've spent the last 45 minutes talking about. And it's one of those things that happens every once in a while in coaching where it's easy sometimes with certain clients for the coach to get like wrapped up in, the great sort of copacetic energy and really let the session kind of spiral into nothing. And the other thing that I'll confess to you about that is that I don't think my client felt that we had, not achieved anything. Like he left that session with like great vibes about like, yeah, we're doing it. This is going to work. I'm so excited, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't until like the last like maybe 5 minutes of the session where I thought, we should really maybe talk about this concept, doing the work versus talking about the work. Like, what have we done here today in our session? Have we done the work, or have we just talked about the work? And I think, like, from my perspective, I felt like we had only talked about the work. From his perspective, I think it was a little bit less like black and white like that, which makes sense since I'm an India type one. Everything's black and white to me. And if you're watching the video of this, you'll see I'm wearing a black and white t-shirt. And maybe it only looks black and white to me. Maybe to all of you guys, it looks like a rainbow. So this idea about doing the work versus talking about the work. And so that kind of like popped into my head during that session. And then that was right before I ran my fall retreats in October. And during the fall retreat, the idea came up again because one of the modalities that we used at the retreat was internal family systems. And internal family systems is, I think, of all the modalities I use, the one that's the easiest to talk about and the easiest to not do. So that the concept came up again and we just discussed it. Even the very first day, I was just like, there's a really big difference between doing the work and talking about the work. And especially at a retreat, especially in this like immersive experience that people have like moved mountains to be able to participate in, we want to actually be doing something, not just pontificating about it. And I guess maybe that's another little secondary mini confession for you is that it is very easy for me to pontificate about stuff. That is really, really fun for me. Just, hey, listen, what am I doing all day long with these podcasts, right? It's just me talking into a microphone and just sharing whatever's going on in my head with you. So I think it's really valuable for us to talk about the difference between those two things, doing the work and talking about the work. So I'm going to kind of just give you a few examples of clients I've had who get really amazing results working with me and clients who maybe haven't or haven't gotten where they want to go as fast as they want to get there. And it happens all the time, like in a consultation where someone will say, like, okay, yeah, I really want to do this. I can see, the end result that we're working towards together. I have confidence that you're the right person for me. But like tell me, how likely is it that this is actually going to work? Or how long do you think it will take before I see the transformation that I'm looking for? So if it's a business client, they might be like, well, how long do you think it'll be until I get my first paying client? If they're launching a business, or how long do you think it will be before I know for sure what career move I want to be making? Or how long do you think it will be before my kids stop, starting World War III in the living room every day? Or, how long do you think it will be before my anxiety starts to, quell and I feel like I'm living the life I want to live? And my answer to them is like, honestly, I have no idea. I don't know. And I also don't know if you'll ever get that result because the real thing that determines your results isn't what happens during our sessions, it's what happens between our sessions. Are we having 45 minutes of like inspiration and great chat? And then I see you 2 weeks from now and we just continue our conversation? Or are we having like a really productive, sort of transformative coaching session that then you spend the next 2 weeks implementing? And that is the real thing that determines results or not, or the speed of results or the slowness of results. So, and that's kind of what I mean when I say doing the work versus talking about the work. Now, what's happening in a coaching session absolutely should be doing some of the work. It's my job to be asking you questions that they're head scratchers. That's what I like to call them. Like things where it's like, well, if that's how you see the world, what about this? And, you know, maybe we're quiet for a beat there where you're like, well, I guess that doesn't really hold up. Maybe I should reevaluate that belief I have. Or me teaching you something and you're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense. Now, how do I apply that here? Right? Like there's learning happening, there's awareness being evoked, there's change and rewiring happening in the brain. So, absolutely, what happens during a coaching session is part of the work. But unless we continue to do the work on our own in between sessions, we may or may not really experience lasting change and transformation. So that's kind of what I like to point out to my clients. I'm there to support them. This is one reason why when you work with me, you don't just get coaching sessions with me. You have continuous access to me to kind of dialogue and update me and ask questions and get new head scratcher questions from me between our sessions. Whether you're in my group program and we use the online platform to share questions and answers, or you're a private client of mine and we're using like Marco Polo to message each other privately and have this dialogue that continues. But having that like touch point throughout the break between our sessions is one of the ways that my clients are able to continuously progress and quote unquote do the work even when they're not in session with me. Because that's what really moves the needle. And I absolutely have a couple of clients who come to coaching sessions. They have all of these, questions about like, things to do with how to respond to certain behaviors or what to do about a schedule or how about extracurriculars, like absolutely really valid parenting questions. And a lot of the time, especially if it's the same kinds of questions coming up again and again in a coaching session, what we start to learn is that there's something else going on beneath the surface here. Like maybe you feel overextended, or you feel a tug of war going on inside of you between wanting to say yes to your kids, but knowing that, that schedule is too busy for you and you don't really want to go to soccer, baseball, football, and gymnastics in a day. So there's some internal stuff going on there. The clients of mine who are ready to put aside some of those logistical issues and hone in on that internal stuff and then continue to work on that internal stuff, that healing and addressing discomfort and things like that, those are the clients who see the most change. And the clients who, when we come together after being apart for 2 weeks or whatever, say, oh, yeah, I know I said I was going to probably try that meditation app, but I didn't. Or, oh, yeah, I did journal for one day, but then I got off course. That happens to all of us, obviously. Of course it does, myself included. And partly one of the reasons why sometimes it happens to all of us is because we don't really fully make that connection of how important that is, that it's actually more important than these logistical things that our brain loves to tell us are the most important things. So I kind of thought it would be fun to give some examples of like doing the work versus talking about the work. So in general, I would say anything that's like passive is probably talking about the work versus doing the work. So like listening to podcast episodes, reading self-help books, even like if you're my client, even going through that parenting curriculum, all of that stuff is kind of talking about the work, right? Like you might watch a video of me where I explain how to set boundaries by giving your kids choices. That's really cool information. Probably might even light up all of your like curiosity and learning, centers and scratch that itch you have for like new information or something that feels like it's going to really solve your problem. It's all great. It's not that we shouldn't be talking about the work. We just also need to be doing the work. So if you're a client of mine and you're doing the curriculum, but you're not actually sitting down and putting pen to paper with the workbook, you're not really doing the work, right? Because there's a reason why I set it up that way, that we have to put pen to paper, because I want you to be puzzling through this stuff for yourself, challenging your own preconceived notions, exploring the way you think and possibly changing that, getting clear about what's getting in your way about things, and then being able to actually put your focus on that instead of the things that you thought were your issue. All of those things happen when we put that pen to paper and actually answer the questions and do that journaling and stuff like that. That's in that workbook that you get when you work with me. Or if you're a client of mine and at the end of our session, you say, okay, I want to really journal about this every day. Saying you want to journal about it, that's talking about the work. Actually sitting down and doing the journaling, that's doing the work, right? And it's easy for our egos to hijack even a coaching session, which is supposed to be about doing the work, and make it all just about talking about the work, philosophizing and pontificating and sharing ideas and shooting the shit, frankly. I have a couple clients who really love to do that. And I love all that stuff too. And it's part of my skill set as a coach to be aware of what's happening and say, okay, now let's actually lock in here and do some work instead of just talking about it. Right. And so, talking about or setting a resolution to like start meditating or, sitting in silence for 5 minutes a day, or all those beautiful things where we're coming up on New Year's. I think this podcast episode is going to come out mid-December. So New Year's is around the corner, and we all have examples in our own minds of times where we talked about the work but didn't do the work. I'm going to set a gratitude journal for this year. Yeah, okay, that was a cool thing you said. Did you do it? Right? Like, or I'm going to cut out sugar for my nutrition or something like that. Those are all resolutions, are just talk. It's just talk. Do we actually, you know, put our money where our mouth is with this stuff? Do we do this stuff in between? So if you are feeling like you've been talking about making these changes, you maybe even feel inspired to make these changes. Maybe you've even heard on the podcast or someone else's podcast or in a parenting book or a self-help book, these just amazing concepts that really speak to you, but you're still not really seeing major change in your life. It may be that you are almost like tricking yourself into thinking that you're doing work and making change when really all you're doing is thinking about it and talking about it. So the example I gave at the retreat that I thought was kind of funny was, let's say we had this beautiful chocolate cake sitting in front of us, and the two of us are just sitting there going, doesn't that cake look delicious? Oh, yeah, it's amazing. That frosting looks like it's going to taste so good. I can't wait to eat it. It's going to be amazing. And afterwards, I'm going to have this delicious taste in my mouth, and I'm just going to feel so happy and rewarded and all of this stuff. And oh, yeah, I agree. You know what? That cake looks like it was made maybe by a bakery. I bet you it's super moist inside and blah, blah, blah. And we just spend an hour talking about the cake when we could have just sliced it up and put it on a plate and had some. So think about this cake that you desperately want to eat, whatever it is, whatever your goals are. I desperately want to show up more calmly with my children, or I can't wait to see how delicious my life is going to be when I change careers, or, you know, I bet it's going to just be so satisfying and incredible when I, ask for a raise at my current career or get this business off the ground or whatever, stop being stuck in my house with anxiety, whatever the thing is. If you find yourself just fantasizing about it or feeling inspired about it or getting excited about it or talking about it, but it doesn't seem to be getting any closer to actually happening, this is where coaching can help, because it's my job to hold your feet to the fire and say, okay, yes, we love to talk about it. I'm right there with you. And now let's do it. And how might that be if we actually took some action or committed to one thing or explored why it's hard to commit to those things? Because even that is really important work that we do, is to go inside and explore, like, what is coming up for me every time I'm about to, get the knife out and cut that cake. Oh, maybe it won't be as good as I thought it was going to be. What if I eat it and I still feel hungry? What if I eat it and then I feel embarrassed afterwards because I have ideas about eating cake? Like, all of us have reasons why we hold ourselves back from doing something. And a coach's job is not to say, right now, you have to pick up that knife and cut that cake right this minute. I'm not a drill sergeant. But I am somebody who might say, instead of talking about how great this cake is going to be, why don't you tell me how come you haven't picked up the knife yet? And, well, that's so interesting that you think that. I also have heard you say this other thing that's the opposite of what you just said. What do you think about that? Right? Like, let's have some sort of interaction that helps you actually make an inner shift that makes it 10 times more likely that you're going to pick up that knife and cut that cake. And you guys, the craziest thing is working with a coach could be the cake, right? Like, you might have been listening to this podcast for months or even years at this point. I'm happy to say that I've been making these podcasts for long enough that I can say years. You may have been listening to me for a long, long time and get excited or get inspired about the things that I'm saying on this podcast. And working with me is this delicious chocolate cake that for some reason you just keep thinking about and talking about and getting inspired by, but don't ever actually get your fork, your knife, and your plate out to go for it. And unfortunately, since I'm not already coaching you, that's something I can't help you explore what's getting in the way for you unless you set up a consultation. It's part of my job in these discovery calls is to help you understand, like, well, what's gotten in my way up until now? And what do I need from this person so that it doesn't keep getting in my way? And it happens all the time that part of the work we have in a discovery call is a really frank and honest conversation about why you might not do it. Why might you not work with me? And what do you need to get those obstacles out of your way if you know that working with me is something you actually really do want to do? So think about that. Think about what's your chocolate cake? How much time do you spend talking about the work versus actually doing the work? And what are your own examples of that? How do you just stay in that talking about the work and not get in and avoid maybe that doing the work stuff? We all have our little ways of avoiding things. Like you could watch like 20 minutes of Instagram reels about meditation or like epiphanies that people have had during meditation instead of just meditating for 5 minutes. Which would actually move the needle for you? I think we all know the answer there. So I hope that's helpful for you. I can't wait to talk to you again next week. And I hope you have a great day or week in the meantime. Bye, everybody.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.